All right, guys, we've brought a brand new face to the channel. You guys may have seen him before, though, because he is a new addition to the CONCACAF Council. It is Eddie from CRC Football. Eddie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, my man. I appreciate you coming on. It's really cool that we're able to get someone who obviously covers the Costa Rican team to come on and do this preview with us. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But maybe you want to just let everyone know a little quick background about yourself and how you got involved with CRC Football. And yeah.
Yeah, so my roots are back in the MLS digital offices. I was a senior analyst for Opta, so we collected a lot of the statistics for MLS and Liga MX, and I also spent some brief time writing for MLS on Bleacher Report. And then I pretty much got into coaching and pretty much got rid of that 1099 contract life. But from there, you know, my passion for really analyzing games, collecting data was always there, but you know, there was never really a voice for Costa Rican soccer. So I wanted to make sure that my country was well represented. I got kind of tired of the false narratives that a lot of people in the region who kind of paid attention but didn't really know what was going on. So I kind of just took everything that I did from Opta and Bleacher Report and just kind of came up with my own brand, my own content, and that basically birthed CRC Football.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And obviously you've had a lot of success watching Costa Rica over the past few years, especially, I mean, that quarterfinal World Cup appearance is something that every CONCACAF nation would dream of, specifically Mexico. But let's take a look at your guys' form, because it's a question that I'm very interested in response. And I know I got it touched on a little bit when we were at the CONCACAF Council meeting, but Costa Rica looked dead and buried. They really did. It didn't look like this was going to be their World Cup qualifying campaign. And all of a sudden, with a string of results, you guys are 1 point off of fourth against Panama. You have 16 points. You have 17 points. So from your perspective, when did you see the turnaround, and are you surprised by it?
So yes, I am surprised by it, but that had more to do with my criticisms of the coach, Luis Fernando Suarez, were pretty accurate in terms of what I was critical of. But one thing that I didn't give him credit for was his self-awareness and being able to identify what his weaknesses were and where he was really lacking since he took on the position. So the USA game was really the turning point where, you know, we had a couple players go out due to injury, and we call up, you know, 39-year-old Alvaro Saborío, 37-year-old Christian Bolaños. So we looked dead and buried, but that's because we were playing players that were pretty close to being buried themselves. And I think, you know, finishing that window, 6 games, 6 points, and then looking at the player pool, bunch of, you know, post 35-year-old players, and really just thinking to ourselves, what are we doing here? And that's really when Luis Fernando Suarez kind of stepped in and basically said enough is enough. He's going to kind of take ownership of the player pool himself. And we held what we call microcycles, basically a mini camp. And the first mini camp was held right after that USA game, going into that next qualifying window where we play Canada and Edmonton. And it was really more for Suarez to kind of identify players that he really hasn't had an opportunity to look at, and players that he wasn't familiar with. So we get a lot of that young generational talent, which I thought we would have relied on the first 6 games that we hadn't. He starts getting a look at them, and he starts calling those players in. That's how you get a player like Houston Salas, makes his debut in Edmonton. You know, Jewison Bennett starts getting minutes. Gerson Torres gets his first minutes. He ends up scoring the winner against Honduras in that window. And the players that a lot of people were familiar with from that Dream 2014 run that should no longer have been there to start, they start playing fewer and fewer minutes. So one of the things that I look at, you know, analyzing all the games, Brian Ruiz, 350 minutes played the first 6 games. Minicamp is held. He's only played 150 minutes since, hasn't played more than 45 minutes in a game. So it's less of a reliance on the names that you're familiar with and more of the incorporation of kind of like the new generation that we were all hopeful of, and just watching them perform in these moments.
And do you think it was almost like they didn't want to let go of the past? Because that was a bit of a criticism that I saw early on, was that the Costa Rican team was old. That was simply what they were saying, that this is an old team. It's a bunch of guys, like you said, that were part of the dream generation that did that incredible run. Do you think there was a reliance on, all right, they've done it in the past, they can still do it? Or do you think it was just trying to give them the credit because these guys have done it, they deserve to continue to do it? Because it's kind of hard shifting out. Like Brian Ruiz, to me, is the face of Costa Rica. To me, that's one of the players that I've recognized. He's played at a high level, and it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like the changing of the guard when he's seeing him start shifting out and letting the new generation come in.
Yeah, so I would say there's kind of two parts to it. The media and the federation. So the media for me in Costa Rica, I'm also very critical of, because a lot of these guys have emotional ties and relationships with a lot of these players. So they're very hesitant to be as critical as they need to be. And since they've done it before, they're not willing to go into the critiques that they should. And the young generation, as soon as they play a game, it's one bad game. No, it's not good enough. In Spanish, we call it la camisa le pesa. The shirt weighs heavy on them. And not being able to really call a spade, you kind of allow the federation to keep relying on these guys because, well, no, it's not their fault. They've done it before. But that's really not the case. You know, Brian Ruiz wasn't performing well. A lot of these guys, that Jonathan Moya has good form in the club, but he comes to the national team, he's not doing well enough. We're not holding them accountable. So I think, you know, the media plays this part. I think the federation kind of failed after Gustavo Matosas quit on us after the 2019 Gold Cup, and we call on Gonzalez to be the coach, and you kind of waste a year with him, and then we're in a pickle here, so we have to pick somebody. So Suarez comes in very late into the cycle, right before qualifying. So he really has no idea what he's stepping into, and he has to rely on, you know, the federation. He has to rely on the media, and he's kind of being fed information as opposed to really taking it on his own. And that's where the mini camps really came in, where he was able to do that. So I think the surrounding factors, just the environment that Suarez came into was very chaotic. And I feel the leadership, that there was just a lack of vision from the leadership from the top down. And I really put that on the federation, because a lot of these decisions that were being made and the names that we were given this guy to call on, it's just not where we should have been.
And yeah, and that's kind of the perspective I saw as well. But I mean, clearly the tides have turned. I would want to kind of get your perspective as well. And maybe I don't know if you can totally speak for it, but if you could try to give everyone an idea of what's the mindset like right now, do you think, for the players? What's the mindset like for the fans? Is it very positive? Is it tense? Let me know what you guys are feeling going into this upcoming window, because I mean, there's a World Cup qualifying spot on the line.
Yeah. I mean, so Costa Ricans, we are fickle people. We are incredibly fickle. We can go elated one day and completely pessimistic the next. Right now, I think you kind of have to look at where the ticket sales are. And that was very indicative of kind of what the temperature is like in Costa Rica. So for the previous windows, we had restrictions in place, 30%, 50, 80%. But even with that, you know, you're coming on to game day and there's still several thousand tickets left available. So the numbers now are going to be, it's 100%. The Estadio Nacional can reach capacity 35,000. And I think as of a week ago, the last numbers that I looked at was about 31,000, 32,000 sold, which is well ahead of what the previous windows were. And I think the last window, getting those 7 points, and it really turned in Mexico. I would say the away game to Mexico, beating Panama was great, but we hate Mexico. We just can't stand them. And they've gotten the better of us at the Estadio Nacional, really the only team that in World Cup qualifying has really beaten us in that stadium. So to go to the Azteca, play very well, in all honesty, enough to win. We should have won that game if Alonso Martinez can just bury his chances. I think that's when it turned. And then finishing the window with the victory in Jamaica, which was a must, an absolute must. The temperature right now in Costa Rica is starting to reach to a boiling point where we feel very energetic. We feel very optimistic. We know we have two countries that are coming into Costa Rica that have not performed well. We know we're getting 100%. We know the stadium is going to be full. So it's like a full court press going into this next game, because it has to be 3 points. We need to make the statement that the Estadio Nacional is still a fortress. And right now, everybody's feeling in a way that we can't achieve that.
Now, just to let the Canadians out there know, because I mean, obviously we're sitting pretty high, pretty confident right now, but just try to just explain to them how, because there's a lot of new soccer fans coming in. I mean, it's natural with the rise of the Canadian national team, but just if you could explain how difficult it is to go to Costa Rica, to go to your guys' home stadium, to get a result. Because again, confident Canadians are going in there like, all right, it's time. Like, we're gonna have a 7-9 point window, and I still had to stress it a bunch that going down to Central America is difficult. And now knowing that we're almost qualified, but knowing that you guys desperately need to scratch, fight, and bleed for every single point. I'm just curious to see how big of an impact you think a potential full capacity stadium will have to just juice up the Costa Ricans.
It's huge. There's a bit of a misinformation campaign out there from a few people where the Estadio Ricardo Saprissa, La Cueva, that was the old guard. That's where we used to host our qualifiers. And that stadium is designed where the pitch is you're just, the fans are right on top of you. And the Barra Brava back on the touch line, you can feel the stadium shaking, the ground moves, and it's like right above the locker room. So the environment there it felt very intimidating. So when we get the Estadio Nacional, which was, a gift from the Chinese government, it's designed in an Olympic form. So now you have like a long Olympic track around the pitch. So the fans are a little bit further away. And the notion was, well, it's not going to be La Cueva. So it's not going to be as daunting a place to come in. And it's been the exact opposite. Playing in Costa Rica, it's not about pitch conditions because our grass is very well maintained, very well kept. It's not a foot high like it is in San Pedro Sula. We're not going to ask you to play in altitude. We're not going to ask you to play at 2:00 in the afternoon like they will in El Salvador, where it's like 95 degrees unbearable heat. It's not about the conditions. It's more about just a feeling, and we call it pura vida in Costa Rica. It translates loosely to pure life, which doesn't make sense in English, but it's just pura vida. It's just a way of living where you walk into that stadium and you feel 35,000 people really pushing on an entire country, pushing on an entire national team. And, even though the fans aren't right on top of you, you're going to feel them. The crowd is going to be there. And for it to be 100% for the first time in World Cup qualifying, I think we as a nation, we've been waiting for this because we took in COVID very seriously. The restrictions at the club level, we didn't have fans up until this season. And it wasn't past 80% capacity until I think last month. So it's been a long time coming for us. We're wanting to get out of this bubble. And this is like the moment for us. It's this game that we've been waiting for. So it's kind of like we're all in.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how the Canadians are going to react because I kept saying each and every window seemed to give Canada a hurdle to jump. And I'm in the back of my mind because I just, how grueling CONCACAF World Cup qualifying can be. I'm like, is this Canadian team ready for it? Is this Canadian team ready for it? And they keep leaping over these hurdles. So I'm very curious to see what it's going to be like going to that type of environment with a full capacity. COVID restrictions are slowly going away or are mostly going away. So it's going to be very interesting for sure. But now let's look at the squad side of things. So let's take a look and see if there's any, I guess, from your guys' perspective, any noteworthy suspensions or injuries, anything that will affect your fully fit squad or your best starting 11.
Yeah, so Oscar Duarte is a center back that plays for Levante for us, and he's kind of been the consistent face those first three windows. And he had a bit of a knee injury that's going to keep him out, but we didn't have him the last window. And in his absence, Kendall Waston, that a lot of you guys in Canada are going to be familiar with Kendall Waston. He stepped in, and look, he can still play at the level. He's about 34 now, but he's still a very dominant force on that back line, and he paired very nicely with Francisco Calvo, and the two really performed well in all three games. And then the inclusion of Juan Pablo Vargas, who's a center back that plays down in Colombia for Millonarios, young guy, I think he's 22 or 23. He stepped in kind of substitute moments, and then he started fully in Jamaica. And Duarte's injury wasn't that big of a loss because I think at center back, we're pretty good. We have a solid core of about 4 that at any moment we can rely on 2 and I feel comfortable. It's right back that concerned me. And I was very hopeful that Christian Gamboa was finally going to make his debut in this World Cup qualifying cycle. He was part of that Dream 2014 run, but he was very young back then. Right now, he's in his early 30s. He's playing in the Bundesliga right now in the first division, and he's playing consistently well. But he has kind of like a chronic injury, to his knee and to also he had back problems. So we couldn't really rely on him in like 3 games until we really saw that he was 100% match fit. And this was going to be the window. Gets COVID like a week ago, so he's out. Ricardo Blanco was the right back that was really stepping in his place. He started in Edmonton. This is a guy that is pure fight, it sticks in a tackle, loves a 1v1 challenge, is all about that dual life, but he's been pretty injured the entire season. I don't think he's featured much at all for Saprissa now that I think about it. I don't think he's ever played a game. And so he's not going to be in this window either because he's not match fit. He's not in form, which is going to kind of leave us with Keisha Fuller. So to me, right back is the real position where I feel injury is going to kind of rear its ugly head for us.
And yeah, I think that's in terms of the Canadians. We're looking relatively healthy. There's a couple mostly on the back end that Daniel Henry's got a suspension. He usually plays as a central center back in back three if he was to feature. Vittori's a bit of a hit or miss. I don't imagine he's going to start quite yet. And then Samuel Adekubi, who's been just a revelation since moving to Turkey, since basically joining this Canadian men's national team and putting in consistent performances. So he would have been our starting left back. And we have a ton of suspensions. Not that this specifically affects this match, but a lot of players got to be very careful. As Richie Larea, Frazier, Kay, Eustachio, Cavallini, and Buchanan all have yellow cards, which makes things very interesting because knowing that we only need 1 point, I'm curious to see how Herdman's going to kind of line this up to make sure that, maybe the suspensions can get used the way that he maybe wants them to, and how he's going to set this one up. But so it's very interesting. And for my predicted starting 11, listening to your right back, I kind of have a game plan in mind that I think Herdman may go with. But I'm going to throw it back to you, Eddie, and you can put together your predicted starting 11, how you think they're going to start out, and why you think they're going to go with that system. Yeah,
I'm hoping it's going to be kind of where we left off against Jamaica and against Mexico, and it's going to be kind of like a 4-3-3 shape. 4-2-3-1, depending on what the midfield shape looks like. But the emphasis is really going to be on Joel Campbell playing as the striker this time, and an emphasis on the wing play. I think when you look at our potential starting 11, the biggest difference between this game and when we played in Edmonton is Keylor Navas is going to be at goalkeeper. And Leonel Moreira, bless his heart, the goal that he gifted in Canada, rewatching that game, reanalyzing that game, I needed to take a break after that because I just couldn't believe that after he gave up the own goal to the U.S. that he just gives another howler the very next game. So having Keylor Navas back is huge. If you guys haven't been paying attention, this entire World Cup qualifying cycle, he's only given up 5 goals. 1 was a penalty. So we're talking about 4 goals from the run of play and about 9.5 appearances, which is stellar. So having him back, it definitely allows us to breathe a sigh of relief, just having that consistent player back there. I think we'll utilize a back 4. Ronald Matarrita should be the starting left back. He ended very well in his last game with Cincinnati with 2 assists and a goal. I think the center back pairing will continue with Francisco Calvo and Kendall Waston. I don't think it'll be a back 3, which we could probably shift to late in the game if we find ourselves up 1-0. That's when Juan Pablo Vargas will come in. But I expect the center back pairing to be Calvo and Waston, and then Keisha Fuller at right back. The midfield shape that I would like to see is Yeltsin Tejeda as the anchor, as the 6 in midfield, and then Houston Salas and Celso Borges is kind of like a double 8 in front of him. Borges is more of a technical type. He's not going to be able to cover a lot of space, but he's going to be the calming influence for us in possession. And Houston Salas can be more of that box-to-box force that can make those third man runs from midfield, come back. Recovery speed is incredible. Loves to stick in the tackle as well. And just having him pair alongside Borges gives a little bit more balance to midfield. And then look at the front 3. Like I said, Joel Campbell for me needs to be the 9, only because of the system of play that I really want to play him is watching him drop in from the 9 position into midfield, kind of create numerical advantages in midfield, and then be able to utilize those wingers on the outside, which I would start Gerson Torres and probably Alonso Martinez. And it worked really well against Mexico where, kind of Joel Campbell was able to check in and he can do one of 2 things. He's either going to drag the center back with him and allow, quick layoff ball over the top. And now we have Alonso Martinez, Gerson Torres in space, 1v1, 1v2 duels in the final third that they should be able to take advantage of. Or he's going to be able to turn, spin the defender, and kind of, create those overloads in possession as we approach the final third. That's what I want to see. What I pray and hope that Jose Guillermo Ortiz does not start as the 9, because rewatching all these games in consecutive fashion, the biggest thing that I took away was it was a lot more long ball than I remembered. It was a lot of route one vertical, and it struggled at first because Suarez didn't have the striker that he needed for that style of play. We started with Ugalde, which we should have stuck with. System of play didn't work for him. We went to Jonathan Moya. He's not that big hold-up striker that's going to win in the air. Failed with him. Finally landed on Jose Guillermo Ortiz. But the style of play really doesn't fit our player pool well. It wasn't until he abandoned it against Panama and played Joel Campbell at that 9 role that things really turned around from us from a playing standpoint. So that's why I'm hoping that Joel Campbell starts at the 9 and we utilize this system, because that, for me, that's when we're at most dangerous.
And yeah, I'm curious to see what you're going to think of what I'm going to go with my system here, because I was looking back at the other one, and yeah, I mean, that Canada Costa Rica match probably should end it in a draw, if not for your keepers. So having Keylor Navas back in is definitely an eye opener. But Canada lined up in a 4-4-2 that system, and I didn't think that was their best performance when they got it done. They had Alphonso Davies playing up as a striker at the time, which I just wasn't a big fan. I don't think that's where you're gonna utilize him. So the system, I think, and actually, I don't think. I kind of think that Herman may go with a 4-4-2, but the thing that I would like to see is a 3-5-2 system. I think that's a system where we can kind of rely a little bit on the counterattacks, having very pacey wing backs that will overlap, can really target that right back position. They've done it in the past where, I mean, Jamaica, the right back position has been a big weakness for them, and you've seen these overlapping runs putting a lot of pressure on these fullbacks. And the system that I went with was Borjan in net, right wing back Richie Larea. Now, he hasn't played since getting this move to Nottingham Forest, so there's a bit of interest there, but I still think he's one of Herman's guys. He's going to start at the right wing back position without having Vittoria and Henry suspended, and that's the assumption that Vittoria is not fully fit to start. It's going to be a very different back three, and we have 3 very capable left-footed center backs, and I've been kind of praying that we get to see 2 of them together, because I think I know that there's 3 lefties in here, so odds are you obviously can't play all 3, but we haven't even been playing 2. So I think it's a good opportunity to potentially start one of them at the central center back, Alistair Johnson playing at outside right. I'm kind of leaning towards Kamal Miller as the central center back, Derek Cornelius on the outside left, and then as a left wing back, playing Tejan Buchanan there. Buchanan has obviously played as a wing back before. He's played as a winger before, but he's playing at left wing back right now for Club Brugge in that 3-5-2 system. So he's very familiar. He's getting a ton of consistent minutes, playing all 90. And like we just alluded to, that's an area where he's going to be able to run at your guys' fullbacks. And he's a player without Alphonso Davies who needs to continually step up, because he's just that type of creative outlet that can create something, especially using his pace, his dribbling, his 1v1 technique. He's very good at it, which then allows for a 3-man midfield. Mark Anthony Kaye is in excellent form. Eustachio in excellent form. It is noteworthy that they're both on yellows. And then I think Jonathan Osorio will go in there for a little creativity. And then the 2 strikers up front, Larin and David, finally looked like they could put the ball in the back of the net together. It was a big criticism. That's something that 2 of the best strikers in CONCACAF weren't able to really gel together. It kind of seems like they've been coming over that barrier. So that is the system that I would really like to see. I'm curious what you think as how your 4-3-3 will line up against a 3-5-2, and if you think that'd be the smartest play potentially for Herdman.
Yeah, I think being able to kind of counter our numbers in midfield is a plus for you. Whereas, if you go the 4-4-2, I feel like Celso Borges is going to be able to control the game a little bit more than you guys would like. I've been very critical of Celso Borges, and a lot of that had to do with age, and I feel like we kind of could have moved past him. But I think if he has a lot of time and space on the ball and he has numerical advantages in his favor in midfield, I feel like we'll be able to dictate a lot more of the possession, and we'll be able to kind of transition into the final third with a little bit more consistency than we have in the past, and having to rely on the long ball. So I kind of feel like being able to kind of neutralize that midfield, if you're able to apply more pressure in midfield, give him less time and space on the ball, definitely bodes well for you guys. And then I think, obviously, look, I'm petrified of what's going to happen at that right back role. So anything you guys can do in transition to really hone in on that is definitely to your benefit. The only thing that I would worry for you guys in a system that utilizes a lot of width and going down in there is you're going to rely on crosses probably a lot more than you want to. And Calvo and Watson aerially are very, very dominant. So I feel like if you're going to limit it to, we have to put in the perfect cross, that's probably not the best way to go at us. It might be a little bit more narrow, where I think Calvo and Watson are not the most, I would say, disciplined center backs when it comes to their positioning. and they're going to step up, especially if the striker has their back to goal. They're going to step up out of position a lot more than they should. So I think if the two strikers can really combine and play some quick 1-2s in behind, that's probably the best way to go at our center backs as opposed to whipping crosses in.
All right, and now I'm going to ask for two key players. I want a key player from Costa Rica that you think is going to make the difference, the game changer. That if it's a 0-0, whether it's a big save, whether it's a big goal, an opportunity, who do you think is going to be the difference maker for Costa Rica? And then vice versa, who do you think could potentially be the difference maker for Canada? I'll
say Joel Campbell for Costa Rica. I think consistently throughout the entire process, he's been the catalyst for us. He's been our most dominant player, our most attacking threat, our biggest attacking threat, where he's complete in the sense where wherever you put him, he can make something happen. I still feel like centrally is where you're going to get the most out of him. And I would have liked to have seen him in the 10 position with Ugalde as the 9 and see a little bit more interchanging play between the two of them. But that ship has sailed. So I think, by playing him at this 9 position, I think we'll be able to get more out of the wingers, get more out of Gerson Torres, get more out of Bennett, get more out of Alonso Martinez. And he really has carried that form from the last window into Monterrey. Like, he scored an absolute beautiful goal for Monterrey, I think maybe 2 match days ago. But for us, he has to be the one that unlocks what I expect to be a little bit more of a stubborn Canadian defense, where I think we'll see a little bit more of the ball. I'm trying to think back to the game that you guys played against the U.S., where U.S. had a lot of possession but did absolutely nothing with it. So I feel like our ability to kind of unlock you guys is going to start with him. For you, I see a player like Buchanan potentially causing us a lot of problems, depending on what side he plays on. I don't know if he's going to be consistently on the right side of the formation. If he shifts over, I don't know how fluid that system is for you guys. But I feel like even if it's a matchup with Matarrita, that's one that he can take advantage of. I would put him against Fuller and just see what the first 30 minutes go like and see what that matchup could potentially look like for the remainder of the game. But that's one name that for me, I have a little bit of fear just based off of what our weaknesses are and how you guys could attack it best.
I mean, you honestly picked the 2 players that I would have picked. So I'm going to pick 2. I'm going to pick 2 other ones. But yeah, I mean, Campbell, we know exactly what he can do. He's got a deadly left foot as well. I've seen him score some bangers over the years. And in terms of Buchanan, when you were saying earlier in terms of crossing, that's the reason that I thought him lining up in the left wing back position is so important, because I do agree he may start on the right-hand side. But I mean, knowing that he can cut onto his right, being a right-footed player, I think it makes him a lot more deadly, because he's not your traditional left wing back. He's not when he plays in that position, he's not going to call him up there because he's not left-footed and whipping crosses. What he likes to do, because he's got the confidence, and he's had the confidence pretty much every single time he's played for the Canadian national team, whether he's had really successful games doing it or hasn't, is he will go 1v1. If he has the opportunity to cut in and take a shot, maybe cut in, look for a specific type of pass, but usually on the deck, he will do that. And that's the reason I think that he can be deadly on that side. However, saying that, if he switches over to the right-hand side, that's when you are going to see him play a little bit more in that traditional way, where he's going to still take on players 1v1, but he will be whipping in a lot more crosses as opposed to taking a shot. So that's a very interesting note there for Buchanan. But I do think that he will probably be the most dangerous player in this upcoming one, because switching in transition, using his pace, that's where you're going to get the best of them.
Yeah.
So because you picked Campbell, I'm going to pick Keylor Navas. Now, that's the entire reason that we picked up 3 points was, in my opinion, the mistake. But Keylor Navas is also, I think him and Davies, I think we can both proudly say they're the 2 world-class players in CONCACAF, and he can be a difference maker. And I'm scared when you find him on form like that and he's unbeatable, then it's just gonna be one of those matches where you got to put your hands up and be like, hey, we came up against someone who's built different. He can come up with that incredible save, and it's a little bit worrying. But regardless, I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, it's Keylor Navas. If it's an opportunity, it's a beautiful shot, you can beat a keeper that quality. But knowing that he's in there, knowing he's between the sticks, the chances are he'll come up with 1 or 2 pretty solid saves. And in terms of the Canadians, you took the good ones. I mean, I will go up front. I'm a little bit nervous having Kyle Larin and David played together. Again, we've looked back to them over the past of them not being able to kind of thrive together. Now, the last window was a really big bright spot for us Canadians, because we've been praying to see that type of performance. So I'm hoping that one of the 2 of them can get off on this match. They can still keep that chemistry going and keep that awareness going. So I will throw it on Kyle Larin. He's had a bit of a difficult spell this season at Besiktas, and I feel like he just waits for this window. He's the Canadian men's national team all-time goal scorer now. I'm hoping that form can continue. And if an opportunity comes in the box, 1v1, hopefully he can put it away against one of the best keepers you're going to find. So those are our two key players. I don't think we can go wrong with either one. But Eddie, final question for you today, my man. I'm going to need a prediction. Where do you think this match is going to go, and how do you think it's going to finish?
I am confident we're going to win this game. And I'm not a homer. I just want to get that out of the way, because the first thing that everybody's going to do is like, oh, of course, the Costa Ricans going to pick. Like, look, from the beginning, I said we weren't qualifying for the World Cup. 60 minutes into the Panama game, I looked at where our player pool was. I looked at Luis Fernando Suarez's tactics, just the trends that I was noticing. I said, not a chance in hell we were qualifying. But that goes back to my point where I didn't give enough credit for Suarez and his self-awareness, where after the USA game, he realized what he was doing wrong, and that led to the turnaround. And that kind of led to me believing a little bit more in the national team and the direction that we were going in. And it started to look a lot more, started to look a lot more like what I expected it to look like. Now, we left ourselves no room, like there's no margin for error here. And that to me is the most disappointing part, because we shouldn't be in this position had we started off the way that we should have. But I think Suarez switching up his tactics, him being able to identify the players that were talented enough to take us to a World Cup and starting to trust in them more, starting to go away from the old guard. Brian Ruiz is getting less minutes. He's not really starting in games like he used to. I just feel like when I look back at that Canada game, Moreira did have the error, but I still felt like you guys were pretty much in control throughout. But then I look at that spine. I don't think Ortiz is going to be part of that spine. Moreira is not going to be part of that spine. I feel like a midfield is going to be stronger. We're going to utilize Campbell a lot more. And I think Yeltsin Tejeda was very disappointing. Again, when I look at that spine, he had one of probably his worst game of the entire World Cup qualifying campaign. But, he started the last window to really recapture his old form. So I look at the trends, where we're going. I throw in the crowd. Costa Rica is a very difficult place to play. I just feel that our experience, we've been here before. We know what it's like to play this game where it matters, and we're playing it at home. And I think having that home field advantage and having 100% stadium capacity, I think that's going to be enough. So I go 1-0. Keylor Navas is going to need to make probably one or two ridiculous saves and kind of bail us out, because I think you guys will be able to create, especially in transition. But I have Keylor Navas back there, and it's very difficult to beat him. You're going to have to score worldy like Des did to get by him. But I think he keeps the clean sheet for us, and it's 1-0.
Sounds like a real CONCACAF type gritty affair. Now, I mean, I said it a few times in my prediction window. I said Canada could probably, because every time I say, you know what, they may get a 5-point window, because that's what they seem to like to do. They go up 7, they go up 9. This team is very impressive, but I don't want to say the mentality is going to drop, because I know that what Herman has done with this group of guys, and he's got them wanting to finish undefeated, and I do think that they will. So that's why I was kind of saying I think this is going to be a 5-point window. I think that we're going to get a draw against Costa Rica. I think we're going to get a draw against Panama, and I think we're going to win at home against Jamaica. So I do agree. I think it's going to be interesting, and knowing that Canada only needs that 1 point, I feel like they are going to be careful in the way that they kind of set up, that they are going to really try not to concede, which I think is going to be an interesting little tactical battle there. But I mean, I could see this being an ugly 0-0, a 1-1 type of result. But I mean, that I don't think that'd be the worst result for you guys. I mean, obviously that would get us qualified, but it's a different mentality. I'm trying to say this is that we're fighting for that 1 point over 3 matches to qualify, and we may qualify losing all 3. These points is do or die, tooth and nail, and I think it's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere, an unbelievable match. Maybe not in terms of high scoring, like that type of thing.
But it won't be pleasing. I'm willing to go that far.
No, I 100% agree. And I do think it's going to be low scoring, but I'm going to say a draw. I'm going to say a draw, because I'm going to be very curious to see how you guys compare against Panama through these next 3 matches. I wish you a lot of luck, Eddie. I appreciate you guys coming on. And if you want to let everyone know where they can find you, Twitter, whatever it may be, you can do that now before we get going. Yeah,
Twitter, CRC Football is where I do most of my commentary. Instagram is kind of like an extension of that, where I do a lot of graphical representations of my commentary. But a lot of the stuff after this window, you're not going to care about, because I'm pretty sure that my analysis on Jicaral and Municipal Grecia is not going to be of interest to you. But you want to follow the Costa Rican League and the Costa Rican national team, like that's really my forte, and you can get all my stuff there.
That's awesome. We'll be sure to put his links in the description as well. You can find him there. So one last time, member of the CONCACAF Council. Appreciate Eddie coming on. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers, friends.
Thanks, man.